Welcome to Love and Abuse, the show about helping you identify poisonous communication and toxic behavior. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. That's why it's important that you learn to pinpoint manipulative and controlling behavior so that you keep your power and your sanity. I'm your host, Paul Coliani.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Love and Abuse. I am glad you are here. All the information on the show is meant for educational purposes only. Always seek a professional for your mental health and well-being, and always pick your battles wisely. If I sound a little bit congested, it's because I am. I have the COVID. I have the virus. I have whatever you want to call it, but it's here, and I'm getting over it, working on it, and that's all I'm going to say about it. I talked about it in my other show, The Overwhelmed Brain, and doing fine. Just congested, coughing, sound a little strange. If you're new, you have no idea. This is probably what I sound like all the time. I'm glad you're here no matter what. Thank you for showing up today and listening to this show. The first thing I want to get out of the way is somebody wrote this review of the show. I don't really read reviews of the show on my podcast. I do on the other one, The Overwhelmed Brain, but on this one, I like to keep it succinct and to the content, but this is very relevant. I mean, all the reviews are very relevant, but this one I wanted to share because you might relate to it. There's a lot of people out there that might relate to this, so let me just read it and you'll see what I mean. This person wrote, "This podcast was what finally gave me the ability to understand exactly what was happening to me in my toxic relationship with an extremely manipulative narcissist, and to explain what I was experiencing to other people, and to finally get out of the emotionally, verbally, and physically abusive relationship. Please listen to this if you feel in any way that you are in an unhealthy relationship. I say this all as someone who those who know me would describe as strong, educated, successful, and independent, and I still got stuck in the trap. It can happen to anyone, and you are not crazy or alone. This podcast saved me from going further down a terrible path." That is the review, and I want to thank the person who wrote that and everyone that writes reviews for the show. Most of them are revealing what is going on or what has gone on in their lives and in their relationships, and a lot of them, they can be difficult to read. For me, difficult in the way that I hate to see anyone go through any type of strain or stress in their relationships. And that strain or stress could come in the form of emotional abuse, narcissistic abuse, any type of psychological or even verbal abuse, and of course physical abuse. And it hurts to see that. It really pains me to see that, but it also drives me to continue doing what I'm doing here. And I wanted to read this because I know a lot of people can relate. You might be able to relate to this. There's so many people that get into a relationship and they describe themselves as strong, intelligent, educated, successful, and independent. These are the adjectives they use to describe themselves. Not all of them fit everyone, but you could probably relate to 2 or more of these. And what I've seen over and over again is that these highly functional people will get into very dysfunctional relationships by no fault of their own. They just missed the red flags because they didn't know the red flags existed, or they were conned. That can happen too. And so they might get into a relationship. You might have gotten into a relationship or have a relationship in your life where you felt conned. And it's not always the person doing the conning that knows they're conning. I say that from personal experience because I used to be the person who would be charming, who would appear as very caring, loving, and supportive of the person that I was with, and then later on do this terrible behavior. I didn't have the best behavior back then. I had to go through a lot of healing and changing to get to a place where I am today, where I can look back and say, yeah, that was me. That was who I was. That was what I did. And I feel awful about what I did to the people I loved. And most of my behavior was silent manipulation, silent control, very covert, and a lot of narcissistic tendencies. And it took me several failed relationships and finally a marriage and a divorce to take responsibility. I finally took responsibility for my behavior. I finally decided that perhaps I was the common denominator for all these failures in my life. And that's what changed my life, was taking responsibility, was deciding not to look at them or focus on them and just focus on myself. And that meant looking at someone and accepting them for who they are and accepting their decisions, even if I didn't like them. I mean, accepting is the wrong word. Supporting their decisions and accepting that they made that decision. I may not like that decision, whatever decisions they're making, but if I have a problem with their decisions and their direction in life, it's my problem, not theirs. And that changed me. That changed my entire perception and my entire philosophy, and of course my behaviors. They all shifted. Everything shifted, and I became a different person. I started focusing on myself finally, because I was so focused on other people to change for me. And so I say this with a huge amount of humility, knowing that I did wrong. I did hurtful behavior most of my life. I mean, I'm going to be transparent about it. In every single relationship up to the one I'm in now, everything before this, I was a different person. And I needed that final nail in the coffin. I needed for my marriage to fail me so that I could finally see that perhaps I was the cause of all these issues that keep coming up. And thinking that it's somebody else's fault, it's really mine. Thinking that they're doing something that's hurting me. No, I was doing something that was hurting us and hurting them. So there was a lot of enlightenment during those times. The enlightenment that taught me how to behave like a healthy person, how to love in a healthy way. I tell my girlfriend all the stuff I used to do. I tell my girlfriend how I used to behave, how I used to be jealous, how I used to be judgmental, how I used to be critical, how I would make the person that I care about feel guilty in order to make them change. I wanted to change them. I wanted to control them. And I tell my girlfriend this today. I tell her, this is what I used to do. I speak about it freely. And she says, that doesn't sound like you at all. And I'm very grateful she says that. But that's who I was. And it took a huge step forward in my emotional mentality, my thinking, my psychology, to finally take responsibility and admit that I was this person and I did these behaviors. And if I want any kind of healthy relationship and long-lasting relationship, that I have to stop looking at other people and trying to control them and just make decisions for myself. That's where the big change happened for me, is that I took my focus off the other person and started making decisions for myself. So if I didn't like what they were doing, again, if I have a problem with them, that's my problem, not theirs. If I didn't like it, then I need to work on myself, either choosing to accept them as who they are, or if I don't like it, maybe I need to go. Maybe I need to change. Maybe I need to be the person that leaves. Because if I stay and I try to change them, that's abusive. At least the way I was doing, I was very abusive. It's not healthy. It's emotional abuse, causing them to feel bad about who they are. So again, I'm being transparent. I'm being very open to you to let you know who I have been in the past. And this was about I'd say a good 10 to 12 years ago. About that time, I started learning about myself and learning about my behaviors and realizing what emotional abuse is and was, and figuring out which behaviors made up emotional abuse. And it's all good from there. I mean, this is where my healing started, and I went through a lot. And I'm not trying to play the victim here. I'm just saying I went through a lot of learning. I went through a lot of trying to figure me out. I finally made the choice to stay single after my marriage ended, because in every other relationship after it ended, I would seek another relationship because I wanted to be happy, and that's where I thought happiness came from. I believed happiness came from another person. They were the source of happiness in my life. And so that's a lot of pressure on someone. When you make someone the source of your happiness in your life, what ends up happening is you drain them of their happiness, because you're not fulfilling yourself in any other way. It all comes from them. So that's what I was doing most of my life. I made that other person the source of my happiness. And because they didn't always succeed at that, I had to try to control them to make it happen. I wanted to be happy, so I would try to control the person to make me happy. Again, in covert ways. I was a silent manipulator. I tried to control in a silent way. And I tried to make them think that they were the reason for the relationship failing. So this is a terrible, terrible thing to admit, but this is who I was. And I wanted to get that out there because it helps to know where I came from. I think it helps to know who the source of your information is. I've come from a different background than most people that talk about this stuff. Their background is usually, at least from what I've seen, on the victim side, the person who actually went through the suffering instead of the person who perpetrated the suffering. It doesn't mean I've never been emotionally abused myself. There were times, but I was certainly 99% the person who did it. And I think it's important for you to know that, so that when I talk about this stuff, you know where I'm coming from. And it can be helpful, I think. I think it can be helpful for somebody who's actually done the behavior to be able to talk about it and give you tools to counter it. Because I want you to counter this behavior, or get away from it, or work with the other person, communicate with them. And it's not always easy. It's not always easy to communicate with someone who's doing emotionally abusive behavior, who's being toxic. So this is why I do this show. I want you to be able to communicate. I want you to be able to make empowering decisions. I want you to be able to make a choice to leave or not. I want you to have the ability and the strength to make decisions that are right for you. And I say all of this because the other thing I want to talk about today is it has to do with the people who join the program that I created, Healed Being. That is for emotionally abusive people that want to change. That's another benefit, I guess you could call it, from me being in that space, healing, and then sharing all the steps to healing for other people that I believe a lot of them can be good. I believe a lot of them can be healthy or healthier. I believe a lot of them can stop the behaviors, work on their coping mechanisms, work on their ability to be transparent, just like I am today. I try to be as transparent and very vulnerable, very vulnerable with you. And that's one of the big steps that emotionally abusive people have to take, is being vulnerable about what's going on inside of them at a very deep level. And when they can be vulnerable with you and they can share this stuff, share their fears, their hurt, their shame, their embarrassment, their guilt, when they can be open, then what ends up happening is they don't create any type of block or cover. They don't get defensive. They don't get protective, because they're sharing something they know can make them look and feel weaker, more exposed, because when you share your vulnerabilities, it can feel very exposed. It can feel like you are shedding all your emotional armor and showing somebody who you really are at the deepest level. Just like when I used to be jealous. This was actually maybe 20 years ago. I actually healed from jealousy a lot sooner than other behaviors. But when I used to be jealous, I was deathly afraid of being abandoned and being left alone. And so that turned into controlling behavior so that they wouldn't leave me alone. I was very clingy. I was very possessive. And so I wanted to be with these people, the source of my happiness, because I believed if they were with somebody else, they might find them more appealing and leave me. And so I carried this fear of abandonment, this fear of rejection, fear of being alone with me throughout many years, a couple of relationships, and that turned into bad behavior. And I finally decided that I would rather enjoy the time we have together than have to constantly think about being with the person and being left or stranded. I constantly thought about it. It was a very obsessive thinking. And I have episodes on obsessive thinking at theoverwhelmedbrain.com if you're interested in that. But I learned that I needed to express my true feelings about jealousy, my true thoughts about my jealousy, about why I needed to be possessive and why I did certain behaviors back then. So I started sharing that I was afraid to be alone. I was afraid that they would leave me. I started being honest about it. And that was scary as hell because that meant feeling exposed. And that was the first time I really started understanding what it means to be humble and what it means to be vulnerable and allowing yourself to be exposed in front of people or with people that you trust. Because if somebody is trustworthy, then being vulnerable with them is only going to bring you closer. If they're not trustworthy or you don't trust them, then it's harder to express yourself. It's harder to be vulnerable with them because you think during your most vulnerable moments, they're going to crush you. They're going to hurt you. And so this is how abusive behavior can start, is that you feel like you're going to get hurt, or the person who would be abusive, they feel like they're going to be hurt. So instead of feeling that, they push that hurt onto someone else. They don't want to be hurt themselves. So they would rather push it onto you so that you feel bad. The emotionally abusive person is going to push what they're afraid of back onto you so that you feel bad and they don't have to feel afraid. Maybe you'll feel guilty. Maybe you'll feel like you're being controlled, and you probably are, because they don't want to feel hurt. They don't want to feel afraid, and they don't have good coping mechanisms to deal with that. So they push this behavior onto you, these abusive behaviors. And so, talking about vulnerability, this is what started my healing journey, is being vulnerable and telling people that I cared about, this is why I'm doing this. And that wasn't always easy because sometimes some very selfish stuff came out of my mouth. I am doing this because X, Y, Z. And I would say things that were just selfish. They were all about me. And that's hard to say. But this is sometimes where the emotionally abusive person needs to go. Now, I'm telling you all this because when somebody joins the program, like I'm talking about, the Healed Being program, I'll get messages every now and then, not often, but every now and then, that say, hey, so-and-so, the person I care about, has joined your program, and they say they're doing the lessons, but then they say something like, I'm doing the lessons, why can't you just forgive me so we can move on? And when I read this, I slap my hand to my forehead and tell myself they're not doing the lessons. They're not doing it because one of the first lessons is stop focusing on them and focus on yourself. And I explain why. The reason is because when you're focused on them, there's already a level of control in there. You want them to think a certain way. You want them to say a certain thing. You want them to come to a certain decision. So I tell them, this is what you're doing. You're focused on them, wanting them to change, wanting them to make a choice or whatever, have a certain thought. And your focus needs to be on yourself. So I'll tell them, you need to reflect on your own behaviors, and you need to work on your own behaviors, and you need to heal your own behaviors. And I talk all about that, but I get into the details to help them understand that every time they look to another person, every time they look to you to change for them, they're not healing. They're just doing another subtle manipulation, or not so subtle manipulation. If you and I were in a relationship and I looked at you and said, look, I'm doing the program. Why are you still upset about this? Why can't you just see that I'm going to be fine? I'm not doing those behaviors anymore. So don't think about leaving. Stay, because I'm doing this program. This is what you wanted, right? Where's my finger pointing? My finger is pointing at you, wanting you to do something different, wanting you to change your mind, wanting you to say something that I want to hear. The emotional abuser has to point the finger at themselves and keep it there. I am responsible for my own behaviors. I am responsible for what I've done. I am responsible for what I am doing. If I don't like something, that's on me. It's my problem. I'm dealing with it. I need to heal with it and from it. I need to do everything I can for myself, even if the relationship doesn't survive. This is what I teach, and I'm telling you this in case you know someone who's trying to change or is in the program or whatever. If you know someone that's trying to change and they're pointing the finger at you, asking you, why don't you accept this? Why can't you see that I'm doing the work? Then they're not doing the work. The work is about them. It's not about you. You have your own healing to do, but the work is about them. In order for them to heal and change, their focus, which is like one of many, many lessons, their focus needs to be on themselves. Because what ends up happening is, and I'll give you an example from my own life, when I was married, I would see something my wife was doing, I would get upset about it, and then I would do something to try to change or control her. My focus is on her. What do I need to do? I need to take that focus and turn it back to myself. Where's my finger pointing? Back at myself. Okay, so you don't like something that she's doing. What are you going to do about it? Not to her, but for yourself. What are you going to do for yourself about this situation? And my first thought might be, well, I need to change her. Well, that's not for you. That's to her. Oh, yeah. Okay. So again, this is all when I started doing my healing. Right near the end of my marriage, I started doing all this. I started thinking this way. And one of the first thoughts that came to my mind was, well, I don't like what she's doing. So what am I going to do about it for me? Well, if I don't like what she's doing and I can't point the finger at her and change her, then I guess I'm either going to have to accept her for the way she is, or I'm going to leave, like I was saying earlier. But that's what came to my mind. I mean, I'm either going to have to accept this, or I'm going to have to leave. And my very first answer after that was, well, I don't want to leave. And then I said, but I can't accept it. I can't accept her being this way. So I was in a dilemma. But I remember telling myself, well, you have to choose one or the other. And I decided, well, okay, then I'll leave. And boy, that was hard to say, because I didn't want to leave. Why can't she just change and make us happy? That was my thought. If she would only change, we would be happy. I would be happy, which means we would be happy because I was selfish. And I thought if I was happy, we were happy. But that was my thought. Like, I can't accept it. I'll just leave. And when I said I'll just leave, I had to stop myself and ask, what the hell are you saying? Leave? You're going to leave because you can't accept her behavior? And then I heard myself talking like this. I heard what I was saying. You're going to leave because you can't accept who she is. And again, there's another first for me. I just realized how immature that was. I can't accept somebody for who they are, so I need to try to change them. Just hearing myself say it out loud, it felt like I was an idiot. I felt like a mean-spirited, a mean person. I felt awful because here I am thinking it's important for her to change for my happiness, for our happiness, but I never considered that I really wasn't accepting her for who she was. I really thought I did accept her for who she was, but I was dense. At that time, I was just an idiot. And I look back and think, well, no wonder she was becoming more and more depressed around me, because that's who I was. I really believed that I was this loving, accepting person, but I was doing these behaviors that were very different than that. They were opposite of love. And so I finally got it. I came to that moment of revelation where I said, well, if I can't accept her, I should leave. And if I can't leave, then I have to accept her. And boy, that shift happened. And when that shift happened inside me, that shift of me realizing that I have not been accepting her at all for who she is and the decisions she makes, that changed everything. It started my healing process. And that healing has continued up until this day, and it will continue for the rest of my life. Because sometimes old patterns of thought sneak up on me. And as soon as I feel a little bit judgmental, I have to stop and say, whoa, what's that? I don't want to think that way anymore. That's bad. That's unhealthy. That's toxic. And I take a step back mentally. And I ask myself, okay, what's going on? Because right now you're not accepting this person for who they are. And that has been a huge help, to take a step back when I'm doing that behavior. And again, I'm just sharing this because there are times when somebody you care about will appear to be going through changes. They'll appear to be doing the right stuff. It looks like they're taking the right steps. Maybe they joined the program. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they're reading. Maybe they're, whatever they're doing. Whatever they're doing, it seems like it's the right direction. Maybe they're going to therapy. Whatever it is. And it's important that you always see their own finger pointing back at themselves, never at you. And that's one of the main points I want to make today in this episode, because when you feel like the finger is being pointed at you, and again, this is for the people that say they're healing, say they're working on themselves, when you feel like they're pointing at you and you need to do something, you need to accept them, you need to cater to them or accommodate them or change for them. Whenever you feel that finger is being pointed at you, they're not working on themselves. They're working on you. And I don't want them to work on you. This is not what I teach at all. And this is mostly for people who are trying to continue a relationship together, who want to salvage the relationship, who really knows that there's a better person under there. And they've seen that better person, but they've disappeared. Where did they go? And then the controlling or manipulative or emotionally abusive person has come out instead. In order to heal all of that, that finger needs to be pointing at themselves. And like I said, all that means is the emotionally abusive person has to say, if I have a problem with you, it's my problem, not yours. Because either I'm going to accept you for who you are, I'm going to support you for the decisions that you make, even if I disagree with them, and I'm going to love you as you are, or it's my problem, not yours. It's really what it comes down to. So this is what you should see. This is what you should feel from them. Because one of the other things I teach in that program is that when they start changing, I mean, for real, when they actually do the work, when their focus is on themselves and not on the other person to change, when they're doing the work, the person that they've hurt is going to notice it. They're going to see it. They're going to feel it. They're going to notice changes. They're going to notice differences, and it's going to surprise them. That's when you know changes are taking place, because the victim of the emotionally abusive behavior, when they are no longer feeling oppressed or blamed or guilty or responsible for all the relationship issues, when that disappears, you feel it. You feel completely different. And so you don't even need anyone to say, look at what I'm doing. Look at how I'm changing. Look at all the stuff I'm doing for us. They might say something like that, which is not a good idea, because they need to do it for them. They need to do it for themselves, because even if they get into a different relationship, the same stuff's going to come up. Whether they are reconciling with you or getting to a new relationship, if they don't work on this stuff, that stuff will come up again. This is why it's so important for anyone who does emotionally abusive behavior and wants to change that. They have to do it for themselves. They can be motivated by the person they've hurt. They can say, I will never hurt you again. And hurting you now, I feel that through and through. I have empathy finally, and I'm going to stop doing it. And you motivate me to want to change. But regardless if you're in my life or not, I need to do this for myself, because it's in me. It's not about us, even though it affects us. It's not about you, even though it affects you. It's all about me. And this is a personal healing journey. This is what I need to do for myself. And like I said, when they do the work, you notice it. You should never be convinced that they're doing it. You should never feel obligated to now forgive them and move on because they're doing it. That comes in time, if it ever does. It's up to the person that was hurt to get to a point where they can say, wow, you are different. I would like to see what happens. I would like to go forward with this and see where it takes us. But that's up to you if you are in this position. Their job is to work on themselves. And if they really, honestly, genuinely do the work, they're working on their coping mechanisms, they're changing behaviors, they're focused on themselves, they're reflecting, they're asking themselves questions, they're stopping themselves like I do sometimes, thankfully, much more rare, but it happens when old patterns of behavior appear. They should say, whoa, what's this? And let me think about this. Let me take a step back and reflect on this, because I don't want to think that way anymore. I don't want to have those thoughts. I don't want to be that person anymore. I don't want to do those behaviors. So let me think about this and work on this stuff, and don't put it on them. I don't want to be hurtful to them anymore. I don't want to push my fears, my defenses, my self-protective mechanisms, my coping mechanisms. I don't want to push any of that stuff onto them. I need to work on this on myself, and work on this in myself, so that I heal and feel better in myself. Because I guarantee this is what happens. When the emotionally abusive person starts to feel better inside themselves, and they're no longer pointing the finger at you, they're no longer thinking you're the problem for my behavior, or you're the reason for my behavior, and you're the problem in the relationship. When they're no longer focused on you changing, and they're focused on themselves healing, then everything changes automatically. That doesn't mean if you've closed off your heart that you're just going to open it right up. It could. Some people close up their heart forever, and there's no way back in. That happens. But some people still have that door cracked just a little bit, just in case. And that's a personal choice. Sometimes, like in my relationships, all my relationships, they closed their heart. They sealed it. They didn't want to deal with me anymore, and good for them. They needed to do that. They needed to protect themselves from my behaviors, from who I was. And that needed to happen. That's what caused me to start looking inward and realizing I needed to change. And you could just say their focus was on themselves and not on me. It works the other way too. When the victim of hurtful behavior starts focusing on themselves and asking themselves, what do I need to do for me? How do I need to protect myself now that really doesn't have anything to do with them, but has a lot to do with me and for me. Because it works both ways. The emotionally abusive person needs to focus on themselves, and the victim of that emotional abuse needs to focus on themselves and ask themselves, am I going to allow this anymore? Am I going to accept this kind of behavior? What do I need to do for me? What do I need to do to keep myself healthy, try to be happier, try to feel safer? Is it with this person? Is it not? Should I give this a chance, or is it too late? This will depend on if you've sealed your heart shut or not. If you've sealed your heart shut, then it's hard to open back up, because it's the ultimate in self-protection. Sometimes you just have to take a step and protect yourself no matter what. Even if they've fully changed, you can see the changes and you know they're different, but if your heart's not in it, it's hard to get back to it. There's just too much negative association with their past behaviors. That happens. So this is what I tell the emotionally abusive people who want to heal. I say, if there's still love in their heart, there's a chance. But boy, you really have to show up. You really have to do the work. You really have to reflect, and you really need to keep that finger pointed at yourself, because as soon as you say, why can't you see I'm doing this? Why can't you see that I'm changing? You're showing the behaviors that you used to show, just in a different way. Because what's happening is the abusive person is now putting an obligation or an expectation on you, and you feel it. You feel that expectation, and it's just more control. And so the main point of my episode today is, when the person in your life says they're changing, says they're working on stuff, and seems to be really dedicated to doing it and dedicated to changing, but their finger is pointing at you in some way, and you feel it, you feel the expectation, you feel the obligation, you feel maybe the guilt trip, any of that proves to me that they're missing a few steps of this process. And one of the main steps is focus. And that focus requires a finger pointing at themselves. And what often happens, the reason this often happens, is because their primary goal is to keep the relationship intact, instead of their primary goal being to heal themselves. And that is, I was going to say a fine line, but it's really not a fine line. It's a very distinct line that shows you who's really interested in showing up as a healthier person. It's either I'm showing up as a healthier person for me, and yes, for us as well, or I'm showing up as a healthier person to keep us from splitting up. Because you always can tell when somebody is willing to go the distance, when the relationship doesn't have a chance of surviving, yet they still want to heal themselves. This is why a no, N-O, is a good indicator of where somebody is in their healing. And what I mean by that is, if they ask, well, do you think there's a chance that we'll stay together? And you say, I don't think so, or no. And they say, well, then what's the point of healing? What's the point of changing? Because if we're not going to be together, then I'm really not saving anything. That shows you where they are in their healing. They're not healing. They're not in that space where they can say, it's going to hurt if we break up, or if this is the direction you want to go. But I still need to work on myself no matter what. And that's the hardest thing for some people to do, is to make it about them and not about us. Because us will come if they are healthy. That means if I am healthy, then there can be an us. It might be. Doesn't mean there will be, but there can be. But if I am not healthy, then there can't be an us. And so the person that needs to heal from doing the abusive behavior needs to keep this in mind. And I'm telling you this, the majority of people that listen to this show are either victims of emotional abuse or trying to figure out what the difficulties are in their relationship so they can work on things or communicate in a better way. telling you this because it's important for you to know where they should be in the healing process if they are working on their healing. They should be in that space of looking at you, supporting you where you are, accepting you for who you are, and realizing they need to work on themselves whether the relationship survives or not. It doesn't mean they can't say, I hope the relationship survives. It doesn't mean they can't say that. It just means I'm going to heal and work on myself no matter what. And that could mean that the relationship still doesn't work, but if I don't work on myself, then I'll never have a healthy, happy, long-lasting relationship. I think I had something else to talk about today. I do have notes on here, but I'm not going to get to it. I'm going to just leave this here because if you are in any type of relationship, romantic, family, platonic, whatever it is, and you want to see changes in the other person, you want to see them stop doing the behavior, and they actually want to stop doing the behaviors. They want to be healthier and heal, and they want to treat you the way you deserve to be treated, then I think it's important to understand what that looks like. And it's not so much just what it looks like, it's what it feels like. When somebody is healing, you feel it. You no longer get the glare. You don't get the inflection in their voice. You don't get the words that they used to say. It's almost the opposite. It's like they're actually following my definition of love, which is supporting the other person's path to happiness, even if you disagree with that path. And what that means is whatever decisions you make for yourself, they are for you. And if somebody loves you, they're going to say, wow, I want you to do things for you. I want you to be happy. And if you make decisions that make you happy, that makes me happy. And if you ask, well, if I go out with my friends one night, are you going to be okay with it? And if they say, if that makes you happy, that would make me happy. If they say that, that's a very healthy response. And there can't be any later anger about it. Like if they say, oh no, I'm happy, go out with your friends, that's great because whatever makes you happy, I'm happy. Because some people listen to this show and they say, okay, this is what I need to do. This is what I need to do to make them think I'm a better person now. I'm healing. I'm doing better behaviors. What will happen is, let's just say they said, if it makes you happy, that's what makes me happy. That's what I want for you, is for you to do things that make you happy. But then a week later, they say, well, when you went out with your friends, you were selfish. Then they didn't mean it. They didn't mean it. If it comes out later, they didn't mean it. And so you have to be aware of this. They didn't want you to really go out because they held on to it. And you just got to watch for these things. Whatever they hold on to. If they said that they're going to be okay with something and then later on they're not okay with it, they weren't okay with it. Which means they're not really in that healing space. And again, it comes back to my definition of love. Supporting the person's path to happiness, supporting their decisions, supporting who they want to be because it makes them happy. And if they're happy, I'm happy. If you're happy, I'm happy. If my girlfriend's happy, I'm happy. And I know if I'm happy, she's happy. There's some little nuances in there, of course. But for the most part, you understand. I hope this is helpful. Like I said, I'm going to leave this here. I'll get to my notes on another episode, but thanks for joining me today and share this with others that might benefit. Love and Abuse is the official podcast of the Mean Workbook, an assessment and healing guide for difficult relationships. You can download the workbook today to help you determine if you're in an emotionally abusive relationship. It'll give you the tools to pinpoint the specific unhealthy behaviors causing you to leave so many interactions feeling bad. If you're in a difficult relationship and you want to know what your next steps should be, the assessment and the workbook will help you make decisions that are right for you. Visit loveandabuse.com for more information. Forgive me, I'm still trying to get my voice back here. If you've discovered that you are the one doing emotionally abusive behaviors and you'd like to change that about yourself, that's what I talked about today, the Healed Being program over at healedbeing.com. This show exists to remind you that you're not alone and you're not going crazy. You deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You deserve honesty and sincerity. You deserve to be treated as worthy and significant. Because you are. We'll talk again soon.